So today's webinar is about the two most common mistakes that I see in oral proposal presentations and how to avoid them. I think the content is going to be roughly 20, 25 minutes with leaving plenty of time to do some questions as well. And people ask me, how do you know these are the common mistakes, Jeff? I mean, aren't you this hotshot presentation coach? When you're coaching, don't they not make mistakes? And what makes these the most common mistakes is the fact that even when I'm coaching, the teams fight me on both of these. Like they want to make the mistake by avoiding the hard work it takes to avoid the mistake. And so whenever a team argues with me, fights me on something, I make note that this is something that if I wasn't around, they would be making the mistake. So that's where I got the two big mistakes. But before we roll into that, just for those of you who don't know me, quick introduction. If I can get its turn. How will you know the guy you're talking to went to the Naval Academy? Just like if they went to Harvard, they'll tell you. Naval Academy grad, Navy veteran. I'm the founder and owner of a company called Trident Proposal Management. The role that I hold other than president is I'm one of our lead orals coaches, and I'll introduce the other two coaches here at the end of the presentation. The company itself, Trident Proposal Management, we're a full service business development firm for government contractors, serving the larger small businesses in the category. And we have a few large federal contractors as clients as well. We have a flexible and scalable, globally dispersed team that isn't a team of Upwork people in other countries. We're all US citizens. And what happened with Trident, a little bit of the origin story, is I hired some military spouses that were also veterans, and they kept moving, and we just kept them as full-time employees. And it became our way to get back to our community is we hire veterans, we hire spouses of active duty, and we give them portable, flexible jobs. And so that's how we get back to community. We do it all from business intelligence, pipeline, all the way through proposal writing and management and oral presentation coaching. But let's get to it here. First, before I start on the two big mistakes that teams make and how to fix those mistakes, I'm going to talk about the 6 types of oral presentations, the sort of fundamental categories, and give some of the mistakes on a per category basis. I'll start with static presentations. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm presenting a static presentation with a voice overlay and me talking beside it. The static presentations is what you know, because most everyone on this call likely does static presentations for their clients on a weekly basis, if not more often. I'm going to hold off on the big mistake. The two big mistakes that I'm going to bring up in a little bit both apply to static presentations, so I'm going to hold that for later. Tight time frame static presentations. Those are a little different. So a static presentation, the RFP contains the directions for doing the static presentation. A tight time frame static presentation usually includes a down select. So you down select, and you're given a scenario and you're given a date to present. And that tight time frame is typically no more than maybe 10 days, and it's usually 5 to 2 days. And the big mistake that tight time frame static presentation teams do is they spend too much time on content development and they wait till it's too late to practice. Scenario response. This is my absolute favorite. This is upper right-hand corner. My absolute favorite kind to coach. This is where you need a caucus process because you're given a scenario live, in person, or virtual. You're given a scenario and you have a certain amount of time to caucus to solve the scenario, to create your solution, and then you have a certain time to respond in front of the evaluation board. The big mistake the company or the clients make before they hire me is they don't have a process for caucusing. And if you don't have a process for caucusing, you're likely going to get you're likely not going to have a very robust presentation. And if you don't have a robust presentation, you're going to lose. Interviews, lower left-hand corner right here. This is literally kind of like a job interview where the evaluation board's in a room, virtual or in person, and one by one, the key personnel are excuse me, one by one, they're brought into the room and they're interviewed. And the big mistake that's made with interviews is not having a really robust set of questions to practice with, so that the interviewee gets caught off guard by a really hard question because the coach or the presentation or the proposal team didn't think up the right questions to practice with. Time Q&A, lower middle, this is so hard. This is typically where you get a set of questions up front and a certain amount of time to answer those questions, or they ask the questions one by one, and you have a certain amount of time to get through all the questions as they ask them. Either way, the big mistake that there was two big mistakes that teams typically will make with this. One is they don't have that breadth of questions, like they haven't practiced every possible question they could ask, even the really hard ones. The other is timekeeping. It's easy to not use all your time with the time Q&A, and it's really easy to get caught in a like in a rambling response for one question that takes the time away for the other questions. And then finally, demonstrations. These can be a product demonstration or a UI on a more technical computer demonstration. The big mistake that teams make with demonstrations is they'll make something look too easy, and they won't talk about what's going on behind the scenes that makes this a differentiating, hard to do capability. And they'll just pass through it, and the tab will say, oh, that looked easy. Anyone could do that. And they won't score it. So these are the six types that I've been involved with, and there's nuances to all of them, and they can all be combined as well. And I have an example here to show you of a combination for an oral presentation. But that's not all. There's other parts to this, and what's interesting is a lot of teams make the mistake of not practicing the other parts as well. So one thing is the pre-start technical setup. What's interesting about that is you join teams and you have to figure out, like, to make sure you have to make sure that your video is working, that the audio is working, that you can present, that everyone on the team is up and running and good to go. Or you get into the room where you're going to do your presentation, you have to set up your computer and all that. That pre-start technical setup needs to be rehearsed. Why? Because the mistake you make is if you don't rehearse it, is you look like you're bumbling and you look like you're not squared away. You're not ready. They are assessing you, even if it's in an ungraded part. And if you look like a great team because you do the technical setup in a really professional way, then they're gonna literally start with this high regard for you. Like this is a team that they want to work with. Another one is ungraded introductions. Ungraded introductions, yeah, they're ungraded, but they're not unheard. You can't unhear them. And they immediately set your team up with expert positioning. The other way you can do expert positioning is clarifying question, or excuse me, I'm sorry, ungraded introduction. So that's a place where if you don't practice, you don't position yourself as an expert, and you don't use that ungraded time to set the stage. Clarifying question period. This is another place that if you don't practice fielding questions in a professional, team-oriented way, you'll look like a random group of strangers that's trying to figure something out. What you want to do is set up this interpretation that no matter what part of this, you are completely squared away, professional, and you work and act as a team. Then anything the core and CO can dream up. What I've noticed after 13, 14 years of and over 100 of these coached is the industry and the different contracting offices, they drift a little. They change things, sometimes big changes, sometimes little changes. And those little changes change the dynamic and they change how you train. The other thing that you have to prepare for as well, that mistakes are made, is on the format. And this is so important to anticipate and train for. And we need to start getting used to being live and in person. What I've noticed is the industry has really gotten used to working from home and doing presentations over Zoom or Teams. And what happens is we get really comfortable in that sit down, like video off, just talking to the presentation. and we're not ready to be video on live in person without scripts, without speaking points, speaking extemporaneously. It's a different skill than doing it the way we're used to from COVID, which is live virtual. And I'm seeing a lot of people read scripts, and that's a big trap because if you have an in-depth script, it just starts getting boring. It starts like getting monotonous. I think of the Peanuts teacher going wah 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 wah. Live virtual is so hard to get engaged to, and when we read scripts to our evaluators, I think sometimes they think that we're not the right people. Because why would you need a script if you're an expert? Then in-person virtual tab, this one's a little, this is strange. It's only happened maybe 5 times over the last 12, 13 years. It was one client in particular that would have the team come in and set up a camera and they would stream to another office where the evaluators would watch. And the reason they did that is the core was really paranoid about interactions between the two. You practice the same way as live virtual. It's just kind of weird to be staring at a camera and not staring at the people in the room. Pre-recorded video, oh my goodness, these are so hard to do. Typically, like it used to be that we would create the video and put it on a DVD and then hand it to the client. Now, typically you'll put it on Vimeo with a password protection or private link or something like that. And you need production value for these. And the big trap, the big mistake that most people make when they're doing pre-recorded video is they really want it to be edited to perfection. And that editing process and the retaking process takes so much time, and it expends so many resources for things that don't really matter at some point. And then finally, with or without PowerPoint, whiteboard, flip chart, like you have materials that you're going to get when you're live in person that are different than if you're virtual, and you need to work with those materials and know how to use them to the highest effect. Right. So with that, when you look at all the different formats, uh, and you think about all the different types, and you think about all the different ways you would need to practice, right? Our natural inclination is to present like we would present to our client on a day-to-day basis. And what we typically encounter and what people fight me on is what's important to talk about. And so the common mistake number one, the mistake that happens in static presentations always, and in caucus and response as well, is that we talk about table stakes. So what's table stakes? If you do poker at all, and I'm not a big poker player, just enough to know that table stakes are the bet you put on the table before you get your cards. So you have no idea what your hand's going to be, and you have to put a bet down. The way I look at it is table stakes is a great analogy for all the information that every single one of your competitors is going to say as well. For example, if it's a management approach oral presentation, they're going to talk about some version of PMBOK. Everyone's going to say PMBOK. PMP is going to be the qualification that everyone's going to talk about. It's all table stakes. You want to spend very little time on table stakes. So what do you want to spend time on? And this is where I think, like, if you're watching, this is where I'd love for you to pay special attention, because when you start thinking about what is an oral presentation to the government and how is it different than your regular technical day-to-day presentations, you start realizing that you have to do different things. And so let's talk about what an oral presentation really is. And first, it's kind of like an infomercial. Like the picture here is the guy that does the sham wow. If you're in your 50s like me, you definitely saw the sham wow infomercial or the commercial. And what's interesting is the guy didn't sell the factory, the materials made of, like where it was made. No, none of that, right? And most infomercials don't dive into the technology itself or what and how it works. Like they don't take apart the blender to show you how cool the inside of the blender is. What they do is they say, here's the issue you have, here's the solution, and here's all the results that you get from using our solution. And so it's organized around results. if you watch one of those hour-long ones, like late at night, and it's some kitchen appliance, they don't really show you, they show you a little bit about how to blend or how to do the kitchen appliance, and they show you a whole lot of different food results that you get easily, and they show you that easy cleanup. So it's all about the results. The other thing is this is an assessment and a judgment of your expertise and your character. If you are standing up and you're presenting, they're trying to figure out if you're the right person for the job. So you need to not only present what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, you got to talk results, but you also have to talk about yourself and you have to position yourself as an expert. If they don't think you're an expert, if they don't think you get the job done, you're going to lose. And then it's a group job interview. And this is the part where the coach has a ton of influence as well, because there's lots of techniques that I use to have people interact together in a way that shows that they like each other, they respect each other, they trust each other, they know who's in charge and how to work with that person, and that they have worked together before. And so if you think about your client expects a technical presentation. Your client says, I want you to tell me what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. I want to get input to that. In a oral presentation for a proposal, the client doesn't interact with you like that. The client has seen 4 or 5 of these. They all say the same thing. The client wants to know, will you lower my risk? Are you the right person for the job? And is this the right team for the job? So how do you do that? You focus on what's important. I call this marginal thinking. Like, so the circle is everything you could possibly say in your oral presentation. The inside is all the table stakes, things that really don't allow you to win. But on the outside, in the margins are everything that's really important. One thing is if you're the incumbent, man, you got to use that to essentially create high switching costs and low risk for your delivery. You want to do anything you can to lower risk. You want to talk about how you lower risk. This is at odds with innovation. And some clients say they want innovation, but what I know for sure is every one of your clients wants low risk delivery first, innovation second. Individual expertise, SMEs, we've talked about that. We've talked about like your corporate experience, your relevant experience. They want to know that you have done it before and done it well. CPARs, if you got great quotes, if you got great CPAR scores, especially from the incumbent contract, you need to remind them of that. Differentiation, win themes, positive interpersonal dynamics. You have to look like you know and like each other and trust each other. You've worked together and you deliver as a team. That is something you don't always get to say, but if you're on a proposal team and you guys have worked together before, you want to talk about that. You want to let them know, hey, this isn't our first rodeo together. We've done this before. We got great results. We'll do it for you. With that in mind, I think the next one, oh yeah, techniques for differentiation. So I've talked a lot about these as I've gone through this big mistake and how to correct it. But these are the actual techniques that correct this mistake and bring in the richness that we need to win. So the first is feature function benefit, demonstrated result equals low risk. Low risk, high reward. The feature of your solution functions in a certain way. That's the what we do and how we do it. It benefits you by producing some demonstrated result. Here's some examples of where we did it before, and all of this lowers your risk. That is a sentence structure, a speaking structure that's very influential. It makes it really easy for them to just write down what they need to write down that differentiates you. We talked a lot about expert positioning. That happens in introductions, reintroductions, but it also happens with third-party validation. Third-party validation is when someone on your team talks about you in a very high light. They talk about your skills, your expertise, where you've worked together before, some of the amazing results you've got it. Third-party validation is an influence techniques that produces massive expert positioning without any one person sounding arrogant. Really powerful technique. Differentiated capability, we need to do a deep dive. When we talk about the next mistake, we'll talk about one mistake that people make is they don't look at the competitive landscape. We have to do a deep dive. We have to figure out what's table stakes and where we're differentiated. We got to talk about that. We got to focus on the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria, they have words that we're going to use and pair it back to the government to let them know that we are meeting and exceeding their criteria. A lot of times we get really wrapped on what the instructions say to do and don't dive into the evaluation criteria and bring it into the conversation as well. All of this uh, has to be repeated as well. And that's something that we learn really quickly when we have mock evaluators evaluating our presentations. Some of the most frustrating times that presenters have is when they're told by a mock evaluator that they didn't say something or that they wanted to hear something that they actually said. And the problem was they didn't repeat it. If you say something once, man, maybe 15, 20% of the tub's going to get it. You need to say it 3, 4, 5 times. If it's really important, we need everybody talking about it. Oh, and then finally, the this is kind of a duh as well. Specific and relevant examples and success stories. These position the company, the broader team, and the individuals as experts that can produce low risk, great outcomes for the client. So with that, I'm going to move to common mistake number 2. All right, so this was common mistake number 1 is you just focus on table stakes. And what's funny about the coaching role is I come in and the people that haven't worked with me before think, oh, he's going to help me with my presentation skills and how to stand and how to set up the camera or how to be in person and how to point. Yeah, maybe I'll work on that a little bit. But what I am going to work on is your messaging. And so that's common mistake number 1 is all about getting your messaging right to position yourself to win. Common mistake number 2. And I love the Yoda here. Fail you will if you do not come prepared. It's improper preparation. I'm not saying teams that I encounter don't practice. They do, but they don't do it in a way that produces deliberate practice and incremental improvement. And if you don't do that to get incremental improvement, you're not going to produce a great outcome. You're going to get good at saying and doing things that don't matter. And so that's what this is about. And the mistakes are aplenty here. There's a few. There's no planning ahead of time. You don't have that training plan to execute. You don't do training itself. Excuse me, got an itch. So you don't do actual training. What I mean by training is like right now we're doing some training. I'm training you on some concepts. We need to do some training ahead of time and some pre-rehearsal preparation before we dive into the actual practices. Then the other mistake is just not enough practice, period. I love this quote. Like this is my favorite quote of all times when it comes to rehearsals is professionals practice until they get it right every single time, and amateurs practice until they get it right once. And so what happens is I get into like arguments, I'm cracking the whip and they're like, man, it was good enough. I'm like, no, it's not. We have to do it 3 times good enough to know that we'll do it with the government. Great. No deliberate practice. I've talked a little bit about this up front. The bottom line with no deliberate practice is if you're not incrementally working on something, every practice have some goal to get better, then you're just practicing the same every time. You're not going to massively improve. These incremental, deliberate practices produce massive improvement from start to finish. Instead, you'll kind of just do like this. And what a coach does is a coach like me knows where you need to go and knows that little bit of coaching and that little bit of change that you need to make to get there so I don't overwhelm you with things to do. And then no feedback loop. I always like to work with at least 2 or 3 people that know the client really well, know our corporate experience, our differentiators, know the technology that we're producing or presenting. If that mock TEB is with me, then we have this really strong feedback loop so that we don't say anything dumb. We say really smart technical. We're technically correct in everything we say, and then we're inserting the best experiences, the best stories, the best metrics we can. That feedback loop is critical to success. No process for caucus and Q&A. Again, if you show up, you get your scenario, and you don't have a process to produce a solution, you're going to lose. If you come in and you practice a process, you're going to produce a robust, differentiated presentation, and you at least have a chance of winning. No coach, that's right. And then thinking all oral presentations take roughly the same training, roughly the same preparation. Yeah, no, they are different. So, what's the solution to this? What's cool about today is you're gonna get to download what I'm about to show you. So let me head over to, gosh, where is it? Okay, it should be right here. So this is a PDF download, and we're gonna give you a QR code so you can scan it here in a second and get the download. And it's like literally instant download if you want it. And what this is 15 years of my experience training team after team after team with all the different types of presentations that I talked about and all the different aspects of it. And what I did was I put it into a comprehensive training plan. And now every time my clients ask for a statement of work, I literally go into this training plan. I delete the things I don't need. I estimate the time for the things I do, and I submit it right up front. So if you ever hire me, you literally get a training plan for free before you even decide to bring me on board. And I'll just go through it really quick. So, of course, there's some marketing in there in case you need help. Why do the training plan yourself if you can hire a professional to do it? There's some strategy up front. There are the phases and what they encompass. Phase one is preparation. This is a lot of training and setup. Then there's a content development phase, very important. No matter what type of presentation, there's going to be some sort of proven processes, methodologies, content you're going to need to have in hand. Presentation structure specific training. Those are the 6 types that we talked about. And then rehearsal and practice and one-on-one sessions. And then in the document, if you keep going, you'll see phase by phase, there's a step and a description. So you know exactly what to do, roughly in the order you're supposed to do it in. And if you go down, you'll see that there's content development, pause, there's the specific training type. So this is static presentations, quick turnaround static presentations, caucus and response. This is all there for you. Chris Pierce, who's my mentor and one of our other coaches, very senior. He's probably coached upward of 150 to 200 of these things. He's like, "Are you sure you want to share this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to share it." So individual interviews, like everything you'd ever want to know, and it just tells you what to do and in what order to do it in. So that is the download, and that is the solution to the problem of not properly preparing for your oral presentation in the government. It's this comprehensive plan. All right. So I'm just going to dive quickly into an example of how the plan applies. This is straight out of Section L of a NIWC Lant orals that they've recently dramatically shifted how they do contracting, and they use this structure quite a bit now. They have this introductory period up front, so you better be ready to introduce your team. Then they have a static presentation with 3 different elements, A1, A2, A3, and they're allotted 45 minutes for that. And then they get one on-the-spot question. So they do their static presentation, they get one on-the-spot question, and then they get 10 minutes to review the question and 15 minutes to present their response. So it's an introduction, static presentation, and then a caucus and response. It's going to take roughly, hour and a half-ish, and likely they'll have clarifying questions at the end. So how does the training plan apply? First, phase one, we're going to do team selection. We got to get our differentiators down. We have to figure out introductions. We got to do some presentation skills training. Got to get our mock tub selection together. This is not all of it. These are the big steps. Phase two, we got to get some content developed, reviewed. We got to get feedback on that content. Most importantly, though, the presenters need to walk through at pink and red so that the presentation development team gets feedback from the presenters. Very important before you submit it. Phase three is that caucus and response. I'm going to give you a 10-minute process to develop your response to the question. So there's caucus training involved. We need to have an outline developed. That's our standard outline for response. We need to do full practices. And then we got to do even more intensive practicing where we practice in parts, maybe A1 first, the A2, A3. I might need to do some one-on-one coaching with people to get their slides tight and their talk track right. And then we do full dress rehearsals after that. So this is just like a simple, basically a abbreviated look at how my training plan or the Trident training plan is applied to a particular construct at NIWC. All right, real quick plug for hiring a coach. I love this. Staring down that scary presentation alone versus having a coach to encourage me through it. And yeah, coaches absolutely need to be cheerleaders for sure. They need to cheer you on and notice everything that's going well while they give that critical critique. And so, why is it that you would want to hire an outside coach? So, one is the proposal team almost always doesn't have the experience to do it. Another is that it's really a perfect role for a consultant because you don't have to work with us afterwards. And why that's like we come in with expertise and then we leave like a good consultant does. And why that's important is it maintains really healthy boundaries between the people at work so that the proposal manager doesn't become the de facto coach and has to criticize the president of the company or the VP or people that they work with day to day. You don't, someone who's not trained in doing that critique also can step on toes, upset people, and that upsets the balance of the proposal team overall. The other reason too is whoever you're going to have doing the coach is not going to be doing something that they could be doing better. And so that's having the right person in the right seat that gets it, wants it, and can do it. That's an EOS. If you're familiar with EOS, that's EOS terminology. Let's have the right people in the right seats, and that includes having the right coach coaching the team. All right. Who are our coaches? Glad you asked. I'm the coach. I've introduced myself. Alexis Romero has been coaching for 5 years. She's basically our junior proposal coach. She's quite good at interviews, really good at interviews and one-on-ones, really good at static presentations. And then Chris Pierce, senior proposal coach, he's been doing it for years. He literally has coached so many, lost count, and he has broad experience across the entire DoD, all the IC and the intelligence community, and commercial and actually in foreign government as well. It's just huge experience. He is my mentor and coach. He coaches the coaches. And then these are the things we do. Like I said in the beginning, Morgan Over is a expert at the bossing the deck and getting the deck together for us. And she also manages the graphics people. We have the coaching. And then if you want, we can just come in and get your training plan and strategy together so that you do it right when you do it on your own. We have a landing page for all our oral presentation coaching, but I'll give you an easier way to get there. But actually, sorry. So this is, if you just go to Trident Proposals, Oral Presentation Coaching, you'll see everything we do with coaching. And then we have 2 QR codes for you that I'll leave up for a bit as we go into questions. One is the oral training plan template. That's this QR code. And that'll get you the download of the PDF that I showed you with our Trident's proprietary way of approaching all orals. Just delete what you don't need. And then if you want monthly coaching tips, I'm going to be putting together training like this and little short videos, blog posts, that kind of thing. And so if you'd like, just in your inbox, a chance to get better at presentations in general and better at proposal presentations to the government, hit this one and sign up. We don't share emails, and it's easy to unsubscribe. So give it a shot. If you like it, great. And if you don't, just unsubscribe. Cool. And so I'll leave that up for a second, but I believe the next thing is questions. So Morgan, since I'm new to Teams webinar, would you please help me with the questions?
Absolutely.
If there are any.
Yep. So we have 3 questions. So
Sweet.
Liz asked, would this orals training plan template be available to share? And
right
you can see the QR codes on there, but also I put the direct link in the chat. So if anybody wants to go directly there, feel free to share that.
Awesome.
Second question, Jeff, comes from Lorenzo. He asks, do you have experience supporting GSA FedSim opportunities?
Yeah. Yes. Those are rough for sure. FedSim they seem to be morphing a little bit, but the standard FedSim approach is a 90 slide presentation. Typically, it was in person and live in person, and typically, what you're trying to do with FedSim is have information dense slides that are the standalone technical approach, and you just want to make sure you present every single one of them because what they do is they cut away and don't grade anything you don't present. And so the talk track, the timing, the rehearsal is critical for that. I've seen some other Fed sims. They do seem to be morphing a little bit. But yes, the answer is yes. If you have anything follow up on that, you can put it in the chat, and I'm happy to discuss as well. Morgan, any more?
Okay. Yep. Lorenzo has another question. Is there a
Sure.
cost model used to support opportunities?
I don't. So to, I think the way to answer your question is to split it into two parts. So there's the technical proposal that you're presenting in this case, or you have written, and that goes in and is separate for costing. And so the cost volume is almost always separate. The technical evaluation board never sees that. Only the contract officer sees that. So the contracting officer can make decisions based on cost. So that's one part. If you're looking at costing how much orals is going to cost you, that it's always expensive. And one thing that I talk about is how to capture and why to try to insert orals into your presentation. So I can bring that up actually. I have it as a backup slide. And so orals is expensive. And the reason it's expensive is, yeah, you have to hire a coach, but that's really not the most expensive part. You have to bring people from your teammates and your team. You have to bring them together, and they spend hours and hours and hours working on the static presentation. And what that means is you're paying them to do that out of your proposal budget, and you're not getting any revenue from them, and they're not doing the things that they would normally do out in the market. And so if you think about it, the higher the orals cost, the fewer people will enter. The harder it is to do orals, the fewer people will actually compete. And I've seen this a couple of times with one client where they shaped an all-day orals with a lot of really technical presentations. And the first 5-year increment of it, only one other team competed with them. And the second 5-year increment, nobody competed with them because it was a moat, it was a barrier. They didn't want to do it. And so I don't have I typically just build a spreadsheet for the cost for orals, because it's typically guided by internal rates, and I don't have a model for that. So yeah. Anything else, Morgan?
There are no additional questions in the chat, but if anybody has additional questions or if there are any follow-ups. Okay. Let's see. Lorenzo just had a follow-up for you, Jeff. He said, we work across multiple FedSim bids and leverage orals coaches, looking to see if there's an opportunity to work on FedSim bids.
Yeah, absolutely. If uh yeah, if you want, you could if you do either one of these, or if you I think it's info at. Let me just bring this up. Lorenzo would love to work with you. And if you want, you can either email just to kind of show you. Oh, it's in the presentation. I'm sorry. It's actually in the presentation.
There's also a contact form
Yeah.
on our Lorenzo in the chat
Gotcha.
for the
All right,
orals
get there.
coaching page.
Get there. Come on. Move up. There we go. So if you want, you can just do Jeff, Jeff at Trident Proposals. You can email marketing at Trident Proposals. You can hit one of those contact forms. You can call our phone number on our website, which is right here, 571-477-1945. Any of those ways would get in touch with us, and happy to talk to you about your FedSim opportunities. Cool. I think that's it. We'll leave a pause for just a minute for any Q&A or chat. Whew. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And I hope you have some amazing oral presentations in the future because you're avoiding table stakes and going for differentiated messaging, and you're avoiding no training plan and get into a deliberate practice, improving every single step of the way. Awesome. So we'll end the presentation. Take care.